and welcome back to another YouTube video with Past Papers 101 with Miss Edwards. Today we'll be looking at the 2018 paper 2 for integrated science. Hopefully by now everybody is prepared for their exam, so let's get right into this paper. If this is the first time you're sitting the integrated science exam, your exam lasts for a total of 2.5 hours and your paper consists of 6 questions divided into 2 sections. You must answer all the questions given in this paper. You don't have an option. So let's begin. Section A. Question 1. Name 2 methods other than conduction by which heat is transferred from one object to another. The answers there would be radiation and convection. 2 marks. The next part of the question says, Liana uses natural outdoor conditions to dry her clothes after washing. State 3 weather conditions that will most likely cause the fastest drying time for the clothes. The answer would be a sunny, windy, and low humidity type of weather. The next part of the question says, why does a wet towel dry faster when it is open than when it is left rolled up in a ball? The answer is opening of the towel increases the surface area and allows for heat to penetrate the material. That's 2 marks right there. Easy questions, right guys? The next part of the question says, when Liana visits her grandmother's house, she notices that there is a row of vents at the top of each wall. She learns that this provides natural ventilation. Explain how natural ventilation cools the house. How you'd answer this question is you'd have to talk about ventilation, and this section is a part of your syllabus. So make sure if you haven't touched on that, you touch on it, because we always talk about this, especially because it's something we use in the Caribbean. Natural ventilation. The wind will naturally ventilate your home by entering or leaving through open windows, depending on the orientation to the wind. When the wind blows against your home, air is forced into your windows on the side facing the wind, while a natural vacuum effect tends to draw air out of windows on the leeward or the downward side. So that's why more air will pass through your home if you have 2 windows open on opposite sides of each other. So this is natural ventilation, and that would give you a total of 3 marks, guys. The next part of the question says, Liana lives in an air-conditioned apartment in an urban area in the Caribbean. Explain what would most likely occur if she does not open the windows when the air condition unit stops working. If Liana does not open the window soon, then this could lead to poor ventilation in the room. This could cause a buildup of carbon dioxide, and the fresh air in the room becomes limited. The poor air quality may cause Liana to experience headaches, eye irritation, fatigue, dry throat, dizziness, and nausea. Because Liana is also living in an urban area, there is a chance that the room may become overheated due to the high temperatures in the city. This could cause her to become weaker or even to faint. Overexhaustion is what could happen. So guys, learning about natural ventilation in the Caribbean is extremely important, and that would have given you a total of 4 marks. Now, the next part of the question says, a teacher uses the experiment in figure 1 to demonstrate conduction in a metal rod. She places small drops of wax to hold pins in place at various distances from the flame. So it's showing us a diagram showing conduction in a metal rod. We have a flame, we have the metal rod, we have some pins fixed to the rod using wax at different distances along the rod. We have a pin at 4 centimeters, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, and 16. And these are all distances away from the flame. So the question asks, as the heat is conducted along the rod, it melts the wax and the pins drop to the ground. The data collected are recorded in table 1. So let's have a look at this table. We have the distance from the flame and the time taken for the pin to drop in minutes. So for all of you who would have been following from other videos, or you'd have been studying from past papers, or what your teachers would have told you, you always get a graph question on your integrated science exam, and it's usually the second question, or the second part, I should say, of the first question, right? So it says on the grid provided in figure 2 on page 7, you're going to plot the data in table 1, and this is going to be a total of 4 marks. The next part says on figure 2, you're going to draw the best straight line to show the trend. Extend this line to the x-axis. The third part of the question says we are to label the axes on the graph. And then the fourth part says state an appropriate title for the graph. Now, if you've been following, what you can do to get an appropriate title for the graph is always look at the table, the title they use for the table. So the title in this case is data collected from experiment, but the more appropriate title would be a graph showing the time taken for heat transfer in a metal rod with a length of 16 centimeters. Right, so that would be a proper title to give you your 1 mark. But as long as you can put together a title that is telling about the data that you're actually showing, then you should get your 1 mark. All right, so let's go to the grid. We're going to plot the graph using the pieces of information. I think the safest thing for us to do is label the axes on the graph. So looking at the data, which piece of data would you put on either axis of the graph? So let's go to the graph on page 7. All right, and as you would have known, I plotted it for you. So for this graph, your distance traveled would be on your x-axis, and your time taken would be on your y-axis. And the reason for this is because your distance traveled is your independent variable, and your time taken is your dependent. So remember, your independent always goes on your x-axis. Now let's look at the data and look at how we would have actually plotted it. Remember, when you're plotting your points, you're trying to see where both pieces of data intersect. So we have a distance 4 centimeters. The time taken is 1 minute. So we're gonna find where 4 and 1 intersect. So looking at our graph, we have 4 centimeters here, and 4 centimeters, if we go up, will be at 1 minute right here. So 1 minute on your y-axis intersects with 4 centimeters on your x-axis right here. And so this is where our first point would be. Let's do the second one to show the pattern of how we got that piece of information. For distance, we said that it was 6 centimeters. The time taken was 1 minute and 60 seconds. So let's look at the distance traveled, or should I say 1 minute and 6 seconds, because as we know, 60 seconds make a minute. So 6, right here we have 6 centimeters. So let's go up. We have 1 minute and 50 seconds, right? So it's asking us for 1 minute and 60. So if here is 150 and here is 1.75, so 1.50, 1.75, that means 1.60, 1.55, 1.60, 1.65, 1.70, 1.75. All those other points would be between 1.50 and 1.75. So you still need to use these smaller increments in between to know where to put that data. So we have 6 here on distance traveled, so let's go up. So as I said before, right here is 1.50. The smaller line after 1.50 would be 1.55. We go up again, 1.60, which is what we're looking for. This is why our point gets here. So if you're following, we're going up by 0.50 every time. So 1.65, 1.70, 1.75. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm imploring you, if graphs are where you have your troubles when it comes on to integrated science, get graph sheets, get some past papers, and practice, because unless you practice, you're never going to be exactly correct if you don't know where to put your points using the scales that they give you. So looking at the rest of our graph, you would have seen that I would have put in the pieces of data for you. And so we got these points all the way up, right? Now, the next part of our question, after we would have plotted the graph, asks us to draw the best straight line to show the trend. And you want to extend this line to the x-axis. Now, remember, a best straight line is your best straight line through points. You can use a ruler to do this. All you have to ensure is that some of your points fall on the line. You try to get your line as closest to your points, or passing through as many points as you can. If not, just try to make sure that it is evenly distributed, so you don't have all of your points falling below the line or all of your points falling above the line, but they are somewhere in between, so it is as evenly distributed as possible. Now they ask us to draw the line so that it touches the x-axis, so that's why I drew mine through the origin right here. And I tried to bring it up as straight as I could on this graph, but as you know, I don't have the the detailed lines because we're doing it on the computer. But if you had your ruler, you could have made a better line than me. And for just drawing this line, guys, it would actually give you 2 marks. Now the next part of the question says that and that's 4. From the graph, determine the distance traveled by the heat after 3 minutes. And I have 11 centimeters. So let me show you how I would have gotten to this. Now, the distance traveled, right? They don't tell us that, but they tell us the time. So all you have to do is find where 3 minutes is and draw a dotted line out until you touch your line of best fit. Wherever this touches your line of best fit, you're gonna bring it down to see the distance it would have taken when we would have gotten to 3 minutes. And right here we know that it is 11 centimeters. So guys, whenever they give you a piece of data and they ask you to use your graph, you're gonna find that piece of data, bring it out to your line of best fit, and see where the other piece of data would coincide with what you would have had. Now it says also that we should determine the distance traveled by the heat when the timing started. Now looking at my graph, the timing would have started right here at 0. So as soon as the person started, that's when it would have begun. So I just drew my line out and touched where my line of best fit is, and I have about 4 millimeters right here, because if right here is 1 centimeter, remember we know that 10 millimeters equals to 1 centimeter. So each of these smaller strokes would represent 2 millimeters. So I have 2, 4. So I would say 4 millimeters is the distance when the timing would have started. All right, guys, remember to practice on your graphs. And that's a total of 25 marks, guys. You cannot lose on your first question on the paper because it's worth all of 25 marks. And if you did not know, your paper is actually marked out of 100. So the 25 marks that you would have done first is a quarter of the paper. All right, so let's get to question 2. We're finished with the graph. State 2 examples of household pests other than houseflies and rats. And the answers would be cockroaches, mosquitoes, and ants. Those would be the answers that would give you your 2 marks. Even though they asked for 2, I gave you 3. Now the other part of the question says to define the term parasite. A parasite is an organism that feeds on the body of another organism called its host. That's 1 mark. The next part of the question says you should label the stages A, B, and C to complete the life cycle of the housefly. The question says write your answers in the relevant spaces in figure 3. So guys, they would have given us an image of the life cycle of a housefly. We have the adult fly. The first cycle, or the first part of the cycle I should say, labeled A, would be the eggs. And I think this should have been a giveaway, because once you see the smallest structures there, you know those would usually be the eggs. B, we would say this is the larvae or the larval stage, right? So these little structures are the larvae. And then the last structure is the pupa or the pupae. In some books, they don't penalize you for the spelling, because in some books we see P-U-P-A-E, and some books it's P-U-P-A, but it doesn't matter. So we have the adult, the eggs, the larvae, and the pupa, and all of this would give you a total of 2 marks. Next part of the question. The government proposes the use of chemical sprays to control pests. Suggest 3 harmful effects of chemical sprays. The first one is that chemical sprays affect human respiratory system. Guys, whenever they say harmful effects of anything, always see how this can be a disadvantage to humans, right? Affects human respiratory system. So when the chemicals from these aerosol sprays are inhaled, this can cause damage to the tissues of the lungs and the airways. It can also lead to asthma attacks or even cause allergic reactions. The second part of the second answer that I would have given is that chemical sprays can kill small insects such as bees that act as pollinators, and these pollinators are needed to pollinate crops for proper food yield in agriculture. So guys, not all insects are pests, some are useful, such as the bee. And the third suggestion or answer is air pollution. Chemicals can enter the air and cause or contribute to air pollution. Can also contribute to global warming and climate change. All right, and I give you another one. Chemical sprays can also poison organisms if they are disposed of incorrectly and ingested by the organism. So as you would have known, sometimes persons, when they're using their chemicals, if they're getting rid of it, some persons don't dispose of it properly, and it can end up in some of these other organisms' homes or in their ecosystem, their little area where they live. They ingest it and then they can die. So these are some of the harmful effects of using chemical spray. All right, the next part of our question says Mr. Henry has 4 big dogs on his property. He notices that he always has a lot of flies inside his house. Suggest 4 mechanical means by which he could prevent or control the flies. Now, mechanical, guys, when you hear that term, you're talking about physical means. So nothing chemical, no substances being used, things that you can actually physically do that would prevent or control something. So Mr. Henry could, for one, install mesh frames at his windows and doors to prevent the flies from entering his home. He could also set sticky traps that would attract the flies and could kill them. 3, he could remove garbage and refuse from the environment that would otherwise attract the flies, so clean up. And the last thing, he could use electric fly swatters to kill the flies. If you can't think of anything else that he could do physically without using any chemicals, then so be it. If you even say that he could use a slipper and walk around and kill some of the flies, then it would give you your mark. As long as it's a mechanical mean, you get a point or you get a mark. All right, so 4 marks for those suggestions. The next part of the question says a small village is infested with rats. 1, explain one biological method that the community could use to control the rats. Now guys, biological methods now are where we use other living organisms to control the population of another living organism. So a good biological method for this problem would be that the persons in the community could introduce cats who would hunt and prey or feed on the rats, and this would be a predator-prey relationship, and this would help to control the rat population. So instead of using chemicals or physically using traps, mechanical, right, biological method, you're gonna use a living organisms to control the population of another living organism. So in this case, introduce cats to cut down the population for the rats. The next part of the question says some villagers believe that they're becoming ill because of the rats. State the name of the disease that is caused by rats, and the disease is leptospirosis. Yes, I know it's long if you don't remember exactly how to spell it if you see it on an exam. As long as you can figure out what you're trying to say, guys, we would give you the mark. Leptospirosis. Try and spell it as close as possible though, so we can figure it out. The next part of your question, or sorry, the next question, question 3, says describe 2 functions of the outer ear or the pinna in mammals. The 2 functions is that the pinna is responsible for collecting sound waves from objects, and it is also responsible for sending it into the inner ear. Those are the 2 functions of the pinna. The next part of the question says the pinna in mammals comes in various shapes and sizes. Explain how its shape and size affect the sensitivity of hearing. Now the pinna, when we're looking at the shape, right, it's shaped like a funnel, which enables sound waves collection. So if you pay attention to the shape of your pinna, the outside is wider, but as you go further it gets a little bit more narrow. This helps with collecting sound waves. And the size is that the larger the size of the pinna, the sound waves collected will be amplified more. So the smaller your ears, the less sound. The larger your ears, the more sound. Or the external part that we call the ear is actually the pinna. All right, 3 marks for those answers. The other part of the question says a dog trainer blows a whistle in the park. Explain how the people nearby do not hear a sound, yet all the dogs react to the whistle. Now, a dog whistle produces a sound of 50 kilohertz range that dogs can hear but humans can't. Dogs can hear higher frequencies than humans and sounds that are farther away. Now that would give you a total of 2 marks. The next part of the question, Vashti listens to music through headphones, which I know many of you do, and maybe even right now watching this video you have your earphones on or you have your headphones. Am I lying? Suggest 2 adverse effects of the headphones on her hearing. Now, 2 effects of wearing headphones on hearing could include hearing loss or tinnitus, which we would recognize by a ringing sound in the ear. So those are 2 conditions or 2 adverse effects of wearing headphones, especially for long periods of time and if you wear them frequently. So guys, give the headphones a break sometimes. Listen to the music from the speakers, not just in your headphones or your earphones. Okay, the next part of the question says Vashti's mother calls her and she responds by walking over to her mother. Describe how her nervous system processes the sound from her ears and uses this information to respond to her mother. Now, the nervous system processes sound when humans talk by first receiving auditory information through the ears. This information is then transmitted as electrical signals along your auditory nerve to the brain's auditory cortex for interpretation. The brain analyzes the sound, meaning, and formulates a response. Finally, a motor neuron is activated to coordinate the muscles involved in walking, allowing Vashti to respond. And this is what we would call a voluntary action, right? So when she would have heard the sound, her auditory nerves would bring them as electrical signals to her brain. Her brain would process it and send a response that is appropriate, and then her muscles would react to by walking over to her mother. That's what she would do. So we call this a voluntary action, not one that is just spontaneous, but one that is actually thought through, and that is for 3 marks. The next part of the question says an unexpected loud sound startles Vashti and she responds by letting out a short scream. Describe how her nervous system processes the sound differently from the way it processes the sound in CII on page 12 or before, right? So when frightening sounds are detected, the nervous system rapidly transmits signals from the auditory receptors to the motor neurons and then the brain's amygdala. Signals are then sent to the mouth to give an involuntary response of screaming. So this reaction is what we would call an involuntary action that her brain she doesn't really process the response, but her brain in a quick reflex, right, would just allow her to give out a shriek, which would be the scream. So guys, if you were neglecting looking at sense organs, please brush over them. The eyes and the ears are the sense organs that most of the times we see coming back on the exam. Please make sure you know about the reflex arc, how neurons receive electrical impulses or stimulus from the environment, and how it is processed by your nervous system. All right, so question 4. Figure 4 and figure 5 are diagrams of two simple machines. We have the first one, and then figure 4, which is a lever, and then figure 5, which is a pulley system. So it says we should label, right, state the names of the parts labeled A, B, and C on the lever in figure 4. Write your answers in the relevant spaces. So A would be your effort, B would be the load, and C would be the fulcrum. Please make sure you know about simple machines. Name the class of lever in figure 4. The answer would be a first class lever. The third part of the question, says give the name of a simple machine other than the lever or the pulley. Answers could be the wheel and axle or inclined plane. That's 1 mark. Now the next part of the question says a construction worker uses a crowbar to move a heavy stone as shown in figure 4 on page 14. The weight of the stone is 100 newtons. Using the lever in figure 4, the worker exerts a force of 250 newtons when moving the stone. Calculate the mechanical advantage of the lever in figure 4. Now the formula for finding mechanical advantage is load divided by effort. Now in this case, the weight of the stone is the load, so that is 1000 newtons. And then the effort would be the force of 250 that the worker is using to move the stone. So we have 1000 newtons divided by 250 newtons, which would give us a mechanical advantage of 4. Remember, when you are dividing two figures of the same unit, both cancel each other, so mechanical advantage doesn't have a unit, so it would just remain as 4. So please remember that formula. Mechanical advantage is equal to load divided by effort. Please make sure you know how to read your question so you can identify which figure is the load and which one is the effort, because if you would have put 250 divided by 1000, it would have given you a different answer and it would not be correct. Alright guys, the next part of the question says we should calculate the work done on the stone in figure 4 if it is lifted to a vertical distance of 0.1 meters. State the unit in your answer. Now if it's asking you to calculate work and it has given you distance, you're going to use the formula work is equal to force multiplied by distance. In this case, the force, right, is the 250, the same effort that is being done being used by the worker, and the distance is a 0.1, right? So the work is going to be equal to 25 and the unit is joules. So remember, the unit for work is joules, so that would be your answer, which would have given you a total of 4 marks. Even though they're simple guys, they're worth a good amount of marks, so please make sure you know how to calculate these units or complete these calculations, because at the end of the day, that's 7 marks that you can't afford to lose. All right, identify 2 causes other than friction or loss of efficiency of the pulley system shown in figure 5 on page 14. Corrosion is one of them, right, which occurs due to rusting of the parts of the wheel of the pulley, and the second one is the weight of the effort of the lower block rising. So corrosion can affect your pulley system, and also the amount of weight that is being applied, right, to the pulley system, that can affect its efficiency. Also, if the material that makes your pulley, right, the rope, if it is weaker, that could also affect the efficiency of the system. So anything that could affect your pulley from working properly could be one of those that will give you the mark, 2 marks for that. The next part says outline how friction decreases the efficiency of the pulley. So the answer I have is that friction slows down machines. When both objects move over each other in the opposite direction, frictional force is produced. So friction would just slow down everything. Instead of gliding easily over the wheel, the rope would stick and it just would not pull as smooth as it should. All right, so that's 1 mark. And guys, we're at section B. If you've made it this far in the video, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and send it to your friends. Guys, all of you have the opportunity to get a grade 1, and if it is a case where you can help somebody else achieve their CSEC dreams, do it. Right? When we send good into the world, it will always come back to us. All right, so we are at question 5. So we're winding down nicely. Both plants and animals excrete waste products, right? State the meaning of each of the following terms. The first one is excretion and the next one is egestion. Now guys, I have to highlight this. Almost every year CSEC says to us as teachers, please ensure that the students know the difference between the terms excretion and egestion, because we know you guys get them mixed up. So make sure from this video you know the difference. Excretion is the removal of metabolic waste from the body, right? While egestion is the removal of undigested food through the anus in the form of feces. So make sure you know those. It says identify 2 waste products of plants and 3 waste products of animals. So plants, their waste products would be oxygen and water. Animals would have carbon dioxide, urine or urea, sweat or mineral salts. The reason I put those substances in brackets is either one, I think you'll get the mark, because the main ingredient or the main substance in your urine that you're trying to excrete is urea, and mineral salts would be the main thing in your sweat with a little bit of urea. So if you have sweat, urine or carbon dioxide, you should get your marks. All right, and that's for 5 marks, guys. 1 mark for each waste product that you would have given. Easy 5 marks. The next part of the question says outline how plants excrete waste products through various structures and how animals excrete waste products through their lungs. So for plants, they release excess water vapor through tiny openings on their leaves called stomata, a process known as transpiration, right? So that's how they get rid of the water. The next part, they also release oxygen through the stomata of their leaves, which is a waste product of photosynthesis. Mineral salts or excess ions are released from the soil, are released into the soil from the plant roots. So if you explain anything like that, you should get your 4 marks. Animals now, how do they release waste products from the lungs? Carbon dioxide is a waste product of respiration and it is released from the alveoli in the lungs through gaseous exchange. Most animals release waste products such as urine through the action of the kidney and the bladder. Guys, when animals inhale or exhale, right, they are actually intaking gases and oxygen is being used, but in the process carbon dioxide is going to be given off and exhaled. Now when you're talking about how animals release this carbon dioxide, you have to talk about the alveoli in the lungs, and that gaseous exchange happens here, and it happens as a result of respiration, right? Respiration produces carbon dioxide as a waste product and it is expelled through the body now when the person exhales. So if you are still not as familiar as you should be with respiration, inhaling, exhaling, please try and be familiar with that before your exams. All right, the last question. State 3 substances released from a volcanic eruption and describe 3 negative impacts and 1 positive impact of a volcanic eruption. So the substances now that would have been released from a volcanic eruption include volcanic ash, sulfur dioxide, heavy metals, and particulate matter. So any of those three would be answers. Now the negative impacts, volcanic ash can cause respiratory issues and damage crops and affect the water quality. So if ash gets into a person's respiratory tract, that can cause a lot of burning, irritation, a lot of heavy coughing, maybe even some bleeding. Damaged crops, so when the ash falls, remember, they can cover the entire plant. The plant will be able to photosynthesize and all of that, and it can affect the water quality. If too much ash gets in the water, it's for the persons to drink or to use, that's a no-no. Sulfur dioxide can lead to the production of acid rain, and this can also damage some crops. Heavy metals and other substances can contaminate the water in which they fall and can even kill aquatic animals because they are poisonous, right? So heavy metals are poisons. Positive impact though is that volcanic ash contains essential nutrients that can enrich soil. So you can actually use volcanic ash as fertilizer for the soil, and that's a total of 7 marks. Part B now says that John notices that there are 2 tides, 2 high tides and 2 low tides on the coastline each day. With the aid of a diagram, explain how these tides are formed and outline 3 effects of these tides on organisms found on the coastline. So guys, looking at this diagram, you might be saying, what is this? Now, all you need to do is to go to your textbook. This is one of the sections around the back, right, of your syllabus that most of the times maybe your teacher doesn't have the time to get to, or might send you ahead to do some reading, right? But this is how tides are formed, and a tide would just be that change in the wave pattern. So when you have high tide, you have way more waves, way more water coming up on the shore. Low tide, you have low amounts of water, less waves, so they're not as big. So what happens, right, for this diagram, you would have to have the sun to the far left of your diagram, and then you would draw an image of the earth or the globe, right, which is further away. You would draw a little bulge or oval encasing the earth, which shows us the high tides and the low tides. Now the bulge should be to the left and the right of the oval that you would have drawn, and the bulging part towards the left and the right would be your high tides. Your low tides would be above where you see I wrote low tide, so they should be a little closer to the earth. So it should be elongated, going left and right, longer, and above and below of that oval should be almost touching the globe. Mine didn't get so close, but if you go to your textbook, look up tide action, right, or tide formation, you should see a diagram looking like this. Then you would have another sphere going around the earth, that you would have the moon being closer to the sun. And so the reason for the moon being there is that the combined gravitational force of the sun and the moon, right, would actually cause this bulging now. And actually guys, the bulge is the water on the surface of the earth. That's why we have tide action. So guys, I'm asking you to please go to your textbook if my diagram is a little bit confusing, but the answer would be that the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun on the earth causes tides to rise and fall across the planet. The moon's gravitational pull causes the ocean water to bulge out in 2 areas. One bulge is on the side facing the moon, and the other is formed on the side facing away from the moon. To explain this, you get 5 marks for your little diagram and your little explanation. And the next part says, what are the effects on organisms found on the coastline? The effects would be that you could have coastal destruction, so habitats on the coast can be damaged due to wave action, and if the habitats are damaged, then more than likely the livelihood of these organisms are also going to be damaged. And the other effect would be disruption of marine life. Tides can disrupt habitats and lives of marine organisms on the coast. It may even prevent the breeding of turtles on the seashore, so that would be an example. It may destroy plants growing close to the shoreline. So tides are not always the best thing. And guys, that's the end of the May-June 2018 paper 2 for integrated science. Guys, at the end of the day, your best would be good enough. Please practice, practice, practice. Study hard for your exam. Remember, with God, all results can be distinctions. Send this video to your friends, like and share the video, and thank you for your support so far. If there are any other papers you need me to do, let me see how quickly I can get them out to you before your exams. All the best.